All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jesselie Windhouse, and I'm one of the co-founders of Empire Arts Collective, and this is our professional development series. Today, we're talking about mental health, and our guest speaker today is Dr. Lyndsay Reese. Hey, Lyndsay.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Doing great.
Good. We're excited
Mostly.
to have you. Mostly, yeah. Times are a little rough right now.
Times are weird. It's a weird
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. So, can you tell us who you are and what you're doing here?
I am a doctor of clinical forensic psychology, and I work at the California Conditional Release Program here in Sacramento.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Yay. Well, we're excited to have you talk about mental health specifically for artists. So we have a few questions that I'm going to ask Lyndsay, and we're just going to get this thing rolling. So first, what kinds of, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong questions. What
How
kinds of
dare you?
mental health, I know I'm the worst. Uh, what kinds of mental health considerations do you think are specific to performing artists that might be a little different for non-performers?
Um, when I've worked with people who do performing arts, typically they struggle a lot with anxiety and depression, weirdly enough, and there's a thing called imposter syndrome. So we see that pretty frequently with performing artists specifically. Even though everybody has a certain amount of imposter syndrome necessarily, performing artists is pretty profound. So they'll very frequently struggle with, did I do good enough? Am I good enough? And unfortunately, a lot of really nasty feelings pop out of that. You'll see it in comedians specifically. The theme I've noticed a lot when I watch stand up is that there's kind of that laughing clown effect.
Mhm.
And you see it with like Robin Williams is one of the most pronounced examples of that. So unfortunately, from comedy is tragedy plus time. There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah,
And there, unfortunately, that brings a lot of mental health issues to the surface if you can sort of go there with performing artist.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like performing artists, a lot of our stuff is very personal. So, yeah, that
Right.
makes sense. Yeah. What are some of the biggest misunderstandings about mental health that you normally see?
I think that there's a tendency to not take mental health very seriously, especially in the medical community. Granted, doctors and nurses, rightfully so, are more worried about whether or not you're bleeding to death and if you're going to die tomorrow. Mental health doesn't necessarily put you in that position, but it is a slow killer if you're not careful. In particular, again, depression, suicidality, if you aren't akin to, or if you're not attuned to looking for those warning signs. Depression is one of the biggest killers in the United States. Suicide is, I think, number 8 of the most common killers for teenagers. Um, so I think that there's a tendency to kind of discount mental health in the medical community, and there's a tendency to discount mental health overall, even though it's kind of getting more attention on social media lately, particularly with the millennial, generation and Zoomers. We all tend to be a little bit more focused on mental health. And I think that came from observing kind of our parents and sort of struggles and a little more vocabulary around these issues. And that's not to say that like prior generations have any fault in that. It's just we didn't have the words to describe a lot of these things until now. So I think that's the biggest misconception is that it's not important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's absolutely important. Can you talk more about the dangers of undervaluing it?
Sure. So say for example you have somebody who is pretty depressive by nature, kind of like this Eeyore persona. For example, we have a word for that in the DSM. It's called the dysthymic disorder, and it's kind of this general depressive personality disorder. um, and prior generations tended to characterize that as just, oh, that's just how they are. But now we're seeing that when you have someone who's frequently like that, what we really have is that, like, here's everybody else's baseline and here's theirs. And it's not too far off from dropping off and, just taking themselves out. Um, Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Crap.
Uh,
ADHD is another one. Whoa.
we're just talking about the dangers of undervaluing the importance of mental health.
Right, right. So when you undervalue that, people tend to they internalize a lot of that as, okay, I don't matter as much, and that other people don't value me as much. And the more that you undervalue yourself and that you have that validated by your outside world, the more true it feels. And what's the most logical conclusion with that? It's to act on those suicidal ideations or even homicidal ideations if you were going that direction. So it can actually be a very serious community health hazard when people don't value mental health.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
If you're feeling totally overwhelmed by how scary things are currently with COVID, what's the number one thing you would recommend to get through it?
Oh, if you're totally overwhelmed, I think it's really important to kind of have at least a list in your head of things that bring you joy and bring you up. If not, actually write it down. Because sometimes when you have something physical to hold on to like reference, then it makes it more real and it makes it more established in your life. So if you can write up a list, just a really general, it doesn't have to be super clinical, just I really love ice cream. I really love sunlight. I really love taking a walk, and make sure you do those things, even and prioritize those things. Even though it seems like it's so little and it's not making much of an impact, it really does, because healthy people do the things that to take care of themselves without really thinking about it. People who have mental illnesses or have certain drawbacks or defects, they need reminders. They need to make sure that they stick to a routine and a wellness plan of some kind. And it doesn't come easy to everyone, and that's really okay. It's not always supposed to come that easily, and it's just the way your brain works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you talk more about maybe some low cost or just free methods of taking care of your mental health?
Sure, yeah. So it's free to take a bath. It's free to go out and take a walk. It's free to call your friends. There are actually some low cost options online now. There's a lot of therapists that can be reached online for about, I know that $50 is a little pricey for some people in their price point, but if you can afford a $50 session once a month, sometimes it can do wonders just to touch base with somebody and feel like someone cares about you and is actually listening to you and paying attention to you and checking in with you, especially if they're a professional of some kind. Touching base with a professional validates a lot of the things you might be going through. Um, and That's kind of on the higher end of the cost spectrum. But I find that actually art is a extremely good outlet for all of those feelings inside, specifically anxiety. If you can just grab some paint and just go to town and like rage paint or something, um, those are actually really effective. There's a theory in psychodynamic theory that's um, oh no, I forgot what it's called. Crap. But you have to expel all of your energy to get what's going on out of you so that you can actually bring yourself to rest. But you have to do it to the point of exhaustion,
Oh,
and
interesting.
that helps with anxiety. It helps with anger. Um, and I forget what the theory is called. It's really obvious, and there's going to be so many psychologists that are yelling at me right now. But
we'll
but
just
like,
we'll just superimpose it later over the.
right, when I remember what the hell it's called. But yeah, those are some low cost methods. Making sure you have hobbies and making sure you're keeping in touch with those things and keeping in touch with people and trying to have a routine.
Mhm.
I can't stress how important a routine is. So many of our patients, specifically in the conditional release program, they're struggling right now, and they didn't realize how much they were going to miss groups. They're calling me
Yeah.
and saying, when are we going to get groups back? Oh my God, we're so bored. And we're starting to get stressed out and we're starting to freak out a little bit because they don't have anything to hold on to. And these are
Mhm.
severely mentally ill people. people with severe schizophrenia and bipolar who can't attach themselves or structure themselves. So without that structure, they're left to their own devices and they have to come up with things on their own, and they're just not equipped to do that. Um, so yeah, having a routine, having a structure to your life is incredibly important. Thankfully, it's pretty low cost if you happen to have a job or if you happen to have school or a volunteer program. But if you don't, then you need to get creative and think about, okay, at this time I'm going to get up. At this time I'm going to take a shower every day. At this time I'm going to go for a walk. And just those three things at a specific time will actually help stabilize you every day.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
Structure. Cool.
Yeah,
Structure. Art.
structure.
Yeah. Art also. Very important takeaway.
Structure and art.
I
Yes,
like it.
I
I like
like it.
it.
That's what I'm doing anyway.
Yeah, same. Very
Mm-hmm.
important. This is kind of a broad question, but what's the number one thing you recommend for taking care of your mental health? Maybe like particularly now during the quarantine.
Um, I think that's such a complicated question.
Or maybe
Um,
give me like a few of like the top.
I think that the biggest things that we can do to take care of our mental health really is to stay connected. Even though we are so disconnected right now and so pushed back from our loved ones and our normal way of life, you have to find a way to get connected. Whether it's touching base with your mom once a week, hi mom, or or more often, or touching base with your friends, popping by for a social distancing hello or something like that. I think that that's the most important piece. Even people who are profoundly stating that they are introverts, like myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, whoop, represent. We still need human interaction. We're social creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And this COVID-19 situation has really pushed us into being disconnected. And when you get that way, um, you can lose touch of what you need and how to get there. And unfortunately, when people get that loss, they get sick.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Connection. Super important.
Connection.
Yeah, especially if you can use your art to connect with people, that's always good.
Exactly. Yes. And if social media is stressing you out, stop being on it. If the
Yeah.
news is stressing you out, turn it off. And try to connect in some other way with other people who are not going to do that to you.
Yeah.
Like your supportive network is
Yeah.
going to be really important. And I understand there's a lot of people who don't have that supportive network, and that's where those are extremely vulnerable populations. That we're trying to connect more with the state and try to, like CPS, for example, is trying to do more check-ins with children that they are afraid are being abused, and things like that. School teachers are trying to connect more are taking it upon themselves to contact parents and contact kids who they feel are at risk. So if you don't have that kind of outlet, you have to try to find it because no one's going to pick you up during this except you.
Right. Yeah. Great advice.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are feeling filled with anxiety or rage or whatever emotion. And people are handling the pandemic differently, I guess. How can one handle these intense emotions with less access to our normal coping mechanisms?
That is a very difficult question. Uh, I think that sadly you just have to find new ways of doing that from with what you have. If you can find things that are similar to what you used to do, like say going to work was your release, then maybe leaving the house for a 30-minute walk will kind of bring in some of that similarity, or just going out into your car and sitting there for a little while and listening to the radio, kind of try to mimic those behaviors that gave you peace, um, in the best way that you can. Obviously many of us can't go to work, or we can't go to the places that we used to go. If your thing is to go to a bar with your friends, and maybe arrange a Zoom meeting and everybody drink. I don't know.
Mhm.
But try to mimic those behaviors as much as possible, and try to get sort of the I see somebody is waving a wine bottle. Yes. I agree. Um, so,
Yeah.
but I would
Yeah.
try to, yeah.
Okay. So a lot of artists might be currently out of work. What is your recommendation for staying sane while you're stuck at home and out of work? You kind of touched on this a bit,
Hmm.
but maybe specifically for artists, how to stay sane.
Yeah, specifically for artists. I know me personally, I try to do what I love anyway. And even if you're out of work, um, if you're a performing artist, maybe you could record some fun videos just because it gives you joy, and actually and treat that as something that's still worthwhile, because it is. You may not be making money at it, but you're doing something. If you're a face painter, like our very dear friend, she paints her face all the time and it gives
Mhm.
her joy. And she paints her husband's face and it gives her joy.
Uh-huh.
So still do those things, still keep up your practices, even though you're not getting paid. And you have to just keep on finding your thing, I think.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Well, these are all great tips, great advice. Is there anything else that you want to touch on that I haven't asked you about?
Um, I think I just want to put it out there that, like, I've been hitting on it really hard, but mental health is important. And this is how people die, is during these kinds of things, when we are feeling connected and we're feeling alone and we are feeling like it's not worth it anymore. We
Mhm.
tend to spiral. And if you are spiraling to a point where you are having severe symptoms, you may not have that enough insight. And that's why it's really important to stay connected to people who kind of got your back and who might be like, hey, you're not okay, and check in with you.
Yeah.
Um, Having that support network is so very important. If it's a doctor, if it's a parent, if it's a uncle or a sibling or a friend, just someone. You need to reach out to someone at this time, even if you feel like you don't need to or that you're too strong for it. Still do it. It's better
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually do have another question. Last week, Teresa and I had talked about, when we were talking about self-care, she kind of was talking about trauma and how right now we're all kind of experiencing this traumatic sort of thing, just being in quarantine and dealing with a very
Yeah, the
complicated.
whole world is experiencing
Yeah,
some trauma right now.
right. Yeah. So can you maybe talk about how that's how that might be surfacing for people and how to cope with that?
Sure. I imagine it's going to come up in the form of anxiety, in the form of depression.
Hmm.
And um, I know that in myself, I've noticed that I have maybe an agitated feeling sometimes where I feel like I have to be doing something.
Hmm.
And that feeling comes up for me, and I have to expel that energy somehow. Otherwise, it's just going to keep eating at me.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that other people feel this too. I think it's important to remember that this is a totally novel experience, and we are all in this together, and we are all facing this trauma together. And whatever you are going through right now is totally new and also kind of totally normal. Um, you're not weird for feeling like you should be doing more when you're not able to. And
Right.
it's also okay to not do anything, because
Yeah.
this is wild and it's weird.
Yeah, absolutely. I know some people are going crazy and being very productive, and some people are just like feel like they cannot really do much and are just doing just resting.
Right.
And,
And being at a point of rest is okay. If you're so overwhelmed that you just need to rest, you just need to sleep, you just need to watch Netflix all day, and eat popcorn, okay. If that's going to bring you joy for a day, then do that. And then
mhm.
maybe tomorrow go for a walk,
Yeah.
or get some sunshine, or lay out in the middle of your yard and make grass angels or something. I don't know. whatever whatever is weird enough to like bring you out of the funk, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I think most people should try to have compassion and understand that people are going through a really weird time in their lives, and whatever you have to do to make yourself okay is okay, as long as it's not hurting other people.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Is there anything else?
Please do not drink bleach or put UV lights up your butts. Please don't do that.
Whoa, I have not heard of that second one. That's
Yeah,
a new.
that's something that was said in a press conference by Commander Cheeto in chief. So please don't do that. That's a
Yeah,
really bad idea.
don't do that. It is dangerous.
Please don't. It's a good way to get cancer in your butt.
Yeah, don't want that. So
Yeah.
cool. Empire Arts Collective does not endorse drinking bleach or putting.
No, please don't.
Anyway. All right,
Yes.
cool.
And
Well,
if you need medication, it's okay.
yes.
It's totally normal to have to bring yourself up to, I know we didn't touch on this very much, but it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Major depression, anxiety disorders, PTSD, all of those things, psychiatric disorders, they're still disorders. They are illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a person who has an illness, and just like diabetes, just like colon issues or what have you, I don't know why I said colon, but just like any other disease that you would take a medication for, it's okay for you to take that medication. We need to normalize taking medication to feel normal and feel functional.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
There's
there's
no shame
this
in it.
there's a Crazy Ex-Girlfriend song for musical theater fans. There's a song called Antidepressants Are So Not a Big Deal. It's a really
Yeah,
good song. I recommend it. Yeah, they're not.
I agree. They're not a big deal.
Yeah,
A lot of
most
people
people
need
are.
them. Like, everybody else is right here and you're down here. If you need the thing to bring you up here, that's all right.
Yeah,
Do it.
that's fine. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again. This is awesome. I learned a lot, and I
Good.
appreciate having you and all your assorted stuffed animals.
Yes, I have many stuff. I have a Jolteon.
Oh,
Pokemon for the win.
Jolteon. Very nice. Yeah, you've got some cool stuff. I like the
Porg
playing
up there
game.
too.
It's my favorite. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you later.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you. Bye.